And if you remember on that occasion that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went into the mountains and the Lord through Jibril appeared unto him and said, Ikra. He doubted and went back. It is only when Khadija said that voice is not human that he gained strength. God loves a reluctant leader. And those of you who doubt, bring the 9th memorial lecture to memorialize a man who stands towards Nigerian politics in the nature of the Colossus, a man whom I met as a student in 1975 when I was introduced to history, and specifically the history of independence. History will record that Sir Ahmadu Bello was one of the pioneering African politicians. And in Nigeria, he stands within the pantheon of leaders who will remain immortal. Immortal because at critical times in his life, he did things that people thought he would not do. To put it more figuratively, he dared where the angels fear to tread. Those of you who will remember a few months before he was assassinated, his well-wishers persuaded him to run away from this country. But he refused to do so, saying that he would die for his country, and die he did. So the Sodana may be physically gone, but the fact that we are assembled here to remember him is a testament to the fact that those who live well actually never die. So it can be said, the Sodana is dead, long live the Sodana. This morning I've been invited to memorialize the Sodana by focusing on elections. It is so very easy to confine oneself to a subject such as that. But there is a sense in which one cannot confine oneself to the very narrow subject of elections, whether here in Nigeria or in the continent of Africa. It is true that Nigerians in their millions, on the 25th days and the 11th days of March, the year 2023, came out of wherever they were and elected their leaders. It is true that after those elections were held, some were declared winners and some were declared losers. It is true that those who are declared winners celebrated. It is true that those who are declared losers did not celebrate. It is true that some of those declared losers are not satisfied. And it is also true that in accordance with the laws and the Constitution of Nigeria, those who are declared losers, some have chosen to invoke the law. It is true that the tribunals will be presiding over their complaints. And it is true that in keeping with good manners, particularly as a lawyer, when a matter is sub judice, You did not discuss its merits, and therefore I will not discuss the merits of those cases. But it is also true that around the election there are so many issues that are not captured by the sub judice rule, and that those issues must be discussed boldly for the sake not only of Nigeria, but for the sake of the continent of Africa. All of us know that the post-colonial African states are states that are troubled. They are troubled because after the colonialists put them together, in the case of Nigeria, through the machinations of Lord Lugard, they put together different nationalities. And those nationalities, difficulties notwithstanding, have tried to weld together unique nations, their diversity notwithstanding. In the now well-recorded and repeated words of the Sodana, we found ourselves in territories and nations where individuals drawn from different religions, individuals drawn from different ethnicities are together. And I can so very eloquently remember the Sodana through the vicissitudes of time, reminding his audience, let us emphasize on the things that unite us and de-emphasize the things that divide us. Since Nigeria regained our independence, she has tried to retain the nation that we know as the Federal Republic of Nigeria. She has known pain. She has known the pain of coup d'etats, but she has survived. She has known the pain of a civil war, and she has survived. She has known the pain of ethnic agitation, and she has survived. She has known the pain of religious bigotry and intolerance, and she has survived. And I'm not a prophet, but I know that she will survive. She will survive because the more she is tested, the stronger she becomes. She will survive because within our ranks there are men and women in whom the spirit of the Sodana resides. And knowing so as I do, I have no doubt in my mind that Nigeria will forever remain the guiding star for the continent of Africa. You know, you may or may not know, but of the 1.4 billion of us resident in the continent of Africa, out of every 5 Africans, 1 is a Nigerian. You may or may not know, but there is not a place in this world where there is no Nigerian. You may or may not know that the Nigerians are to be found in every nook and cranny of the world doing great things. You may or may not know that the Nigerian spirit is what gives us strength and pride across the continent of Africa. So today, when we are assembled here to memorialize a great man and to memorialize him in the context of how we choose our leaders, we must ask ourselves fundamental questions. This continent called Africa, was colonized. I remember in 1884 and 1885, the European powers, all of them, sat down in Berlin and they divided Africa amongst themselves. The British were there. They took Nigeria. They disturbed our way of life. The Germans were there. They took their share. The Italians were there. The French were there. The Portuguese were there. The Spaniards were there. The Belgians were there. The Dutch were there. They took away our continent and took our part, never wanting to leave. They found our traditional rulers. They disturbed the order that they had created, and they imposed their laws, and they imposed their governance systems. They said that ours were not good. They came and found our gods, and they said our gods were not gods. They gave us their own gods. They gave us their language. Perhaps that is the only thing that we succeeded in stealing from them and we use effectively. They took our minerals. Then we struggled, and we regained our independence. We regained our independence not because they wanted us to regain it, but it was no longer tenable for them to remain. But they did not leave willingly. They went away wailing and kicking, but indeed they never went away. They forged a neo-colonial project, ensuring that the architecture of the post-colonial state was an architecture that would ensure that that state did not survive. Indeed, no sooner had we regained our independence than they instituted their diabolical machinations to ensure that our country's collapse never to be put together again. Indeed, who among you here will forget that in 1961, they had already removed some of our more patriotic leaders. Patrice Emery Lumumba had been eliminated. 2 years later, Sylvanus Olympio in Togo had been eliminated. Then they stopped eliminating us, but they started engineering coup d'etats. In 1966, the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah had been eliminated. In 1967, here in Nigeria, the military took over, and Abubakar Tafawa and the Sultan of Sokoto and Akintola were eliminated. And they did not stop there. In Mali, they eliminated Modibo Keita. In Algeria, they eliminated Ahmed Ben Bella. And they did not stop there. They engineered many things to destabilize the continent of Africa. And it is in that destabilized state that Africans have always tried to hold elections. Even these elections, the manner in which we conducted them or conduct them, they brought to us. They told us that there is something called democracy, which they define. They define it by telling us that you must have a document which is called a constitution, which when we regained independence, they created in their own image. They told us that we must have political parties, which they created in their own image. They bequeathed unto us judiciaries, which they created in their own image, complete with the dresses that we have in those institutions. They left everything in their own image. And they told us, despite our protestation to the contrary, that elections must be held every 5 years or every 4 years, and that we must have something called the secret ballot, and that once we have had the secret ballot, and that your vote is equal, and once you have had that, then there is a winner, and that winner governs us. They said that. And we swallowed it, line, hook, and sinker. We swallowed it, lock, stock, and barrel. And we have tried. Elections we have tried. Oh, we tried in Congo. Oh, we tried in Togo. We tried in Ghana. We tried them in Kenya. We have tried them in Nigeria. We have tried them in South Africa. We have tried them everywhere. We continue trying. We make our mistakes even as we continue trying, but try we do. Try we do because we hold the view that our people must be involved in the governance system of their country, and that the best way to do so is to ensure that those who are elected represent the people, and that the way to determine that is by giving the opportunity to go to the ballot. But we, Africa, have had problems with elections, and we continue to have. I can remember many countries that have had elections, and I can go throughout Africa. After every election cycle, Africa is never at ease. When they do elections in Angola, after the election, they are not at ease. When they do elections in Uganda, after election, they are not at ease. When they do elections in Kenya, Kenya is not at ease. When they do elections in Malawi, they are not at ease. Not in Zambia, not in Congo, not in Ghana, not in Liberia, not in Sierra Leone, not in Gambia, not in Chad, not in Algeria, not in Senegal, not in La Côte d'Ivoire, not in Nigeria. And as I speak to you now, here in Nigeria, we are waiting with bated breath as to whether the elections will be dealt with one way or the other by the tribunals. But that notwithstanding, we continue to have faith in the elections, the kind of faith that the Saudana of Sokoto reminded us about, not in so many words. You know, when the Saudana was alive, he was a votary of meritocracy. He took the view, which view I invite you to take, that the long-term health of Nigeria, and by extension Africa, not only requires but demands that we must give men and women who have the wherewithal the opportunity to serve us. I can hear the Sodana telling us that merit is the touchstone of true and sustainable development. I can hear the Sodana telling us that ethnicity cannot be the basis of how we elect men. I can hear the Sodana telling us that religion and religious affiliation must not be the way in which we determine our leaders. Today, I hear people saying and attributing to Lee Kuan Yew what they call merit, pragmatism, and honesty. No, it was not Lee Kuan Yew. It is the Sodana. It is the Sodana who first said and talked about merit. It is the Sodana who talked about pragmatism, saying that if you want to catch a rat, it must not matter whether the cat that is catching it is black or white. let the rat be caught. It is the Sodana who said, we must have men and women who are honest, and that is why he said it is work and prayer, worship and prayer, because he took the view that those who are prayerful, those who worship in truth, their religion notwithstanding, will have within their blood flowing the milk of human kindness. So today, when we talk about the elections, we must remind ourselves that we can do better. Africans must remind themselves that we can do better. I am suggesting to us that until this far, African politics have had too many individuals who are mannerless. It is time that we must have people with good manners in our politics. It is time that we must introduce what I have referred to as political hygiene in our politics. And political hygiene is given meaning when we recognize that the positions of leadership are positions of honor and privilege, and that you are merely a servant of the people, not because you are better than them, but because they have given you the privilege to honor and serve. And I want to repeat here now that if the Sodana was alive, he would have said, I want you to be sacrificial. Those of you who are Nigerians will know and remember that the Sodana would have been the first prime minister of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. But he graciously said, Abubakar, go ye unto Nigeria as I stabilize. Because the Sodana believed that a stabilized and a cohesive North would be a good thing for the Federal Republic of Nigeria. That was sacrificial. And I'm suggesting to those of us who remember the Sudan and those who remember what we have done with elections, to always remember this, that elections are not a life and death issue. Elections must not be a cutthroat competition where throats are actually cut. It must be different. It cannot be right that in many African countries, when we have gone through elections, we cannot count a few millions. It cannot be right that those who seek office in the continent of Africa, including here in Nigeria, that when they write their speeches in readiness for the results, they have only one speech, the victory speech. I'm now commending to every politician in Africa that whenever you go for an election, you must write two speeches. Speech number one, victory speech. Speech number two, concession speech. Because when you do that, you are giving meaning to competition. Because it is only those who are reluctant to be leaders who are actually leaders. If you look at all the good books, if you look at the Holy Quran, and if you remember on that occasion that the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, went into the mountains and the Lord through Jibril appeared unto him and said, Ikra. He doubted and went back. It is only when Khadija said that voice is not human that he gained strength. God loves a reluctant leader. And those of you who doubt, when the prophet Musa or Moses went into the mountain and the Lord appeared unto him and said, go ye unto the Pharaoh and say unto the Pharaoh, let my people go. Moses said, choose me not, I'm a stammerer. Choose my brother Aaron. And the Lord said, it is you that I want. The Lord still loves reluctant leaders. And it is therefore, I remember so very vividly the Mwalimu Julius Kambarage Nyerere of Tanzania saying in 1995 that whenever you see a person who desires to go to the State House, you avoid him like a leper. What is in the State House that a man should desire it so much? Because true leadership is a burden. True leadership is sacrificial. True leadership is something that people do not desire lightly. The Saudana of Sokoto was a man such as that. The Saudana of Sokoto was a reluctant leader. The Saudana of Sokoto was an enthusiastic leader. The Saudana of Sokoto was a honest leader. The Saudana of Sokoto was a patriotic leader. The Saudana of Sokoto was a man who believed in his country. That is not to say that the Saudana of Sokoto was an angel. No, he had his own mistakes, but those mistakes he made offered to him teachable moments. The spirit of the Saudana demands and requires of us that when we make mistakes, we should be quick to admit them and use them as an opportunity to be taught and to be guided appropriately. You know, I was reading not so long ago some of the great ideas of Uthman Fudie. And he said that if you want good leaders, they must be leaders who believe in God. They must be leaders who believe in service to humanity. They must be leaders who are sacrificial. And I'm suggesting to us that if our electoral system does not give us such leaders, then such an electoral system is a system that is good for scrutiny and good for examination. The tragedy of Africa today is that we have bastardized politics. The tragedy of Africa today is that politics has become the refuge of men and women who do not desire to serve. The tragedy of most of Africa today is that politics has become an avenue for individuals who want to acquire quick wealth, so that the quickest avenue to ill-gotten wealth in Africa today is politics. The tragedy of Africa today is that many politicians in Africa have only one creed, the creed of greed. And I'm suggesting to us that if Africa is to lift herself from the quicksand on which she now stands, it behooves us to exercise the ghost of greed. It behooves us to exercise the ghost of ethnicity. It behooves us to exercise the ghost of religion. It behooves us to exercise the ghost of regionalism, because as long as those ghosts are resident in us, we can only do evil. And evil is what undermines this continent. You know, when I think of Uthman Fudie, when I think of Sir Ahmadu Bello in the same vein, and when I think about Africa, and when I think about her and her institutions, and my memory takes me back to Addis Ababa in May on the 23rd, 24th, and 25th days. And I can see the leaders of Africa sitting in Addis Ababa, the 32 of them. And I can see some of them. I can see Kwame Nkrumah. I can see Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, who was present on that occasion. I can see Julius Kambarage Nyerere. I can see Modibo Keïta. I can see Ngata Tambalbai. I can see Gamal Abdel Nasser. I can see Kenneth David Kaunda. I can see Ngwazi Dr. Hastings Kamuzuband. I can see all of them. And I can hear all of them. But I hear two of them a lot more eloquently. I can hear Mwalimu Kambarage Nyerere eloquently say, we come here to remind ourselves that Africa must unite. She must unite not because unity will kill or cure all our problems, but when we are united and speak with one voice, the world will hear us a lot more eloquently, and the world will respect us the more. I can hear Abubakar Tafawa Balewa speaking and saying, we are happy to be here in Addis Ababa, not only to celebrate that we have regained our independence, but also to celebrate the fact that we of the African stock are now here and beginning to think of our future. I can hear the Osagie for Kwame Nkrumah reminding us. The Osagie for said, remember that fighting colonialism was only a beginning. And that is why when we fought her, we said, seek ye first the political kingdom and the rest shall come. But if we do not do the following things, we will have sought the political kingdom in vain. They would have given us the crown without the crown jewels. Let therefore us who are assembled here take a solemn vow that we are leaving Addis Ababa united in our diversity. Let nobody tell you, the Osagie said, that we are too heterogeneous. Let them not tell you that we are too heterogeneous to be united. Let them not tell you that we cannot be united. Let us not allow them to emphasize the things that divide us. Let us not allow them to emphasize this unity. Let us therefore unite. I can hear the Osagie say, and the Osagie spoke so very eloquently. And we came, and we discovered to our chagrin that indeed the colonial project is still alive and well. So even today, when we talk about elections, my dear brothers and sisters, never be surprised that the surreptitious hand of the colonizer turned neo-colonizer is always alive. Have you ever wondered whether our leaders know it or not, that if it is a British colony or a former British colony, just before your election, your presidential candidates are invited to the Chatham talks? Have you ever wondered? Have you ever wondered? Because it is in that forum that they are looking at who they shall deal with. I look forward to the day when no African leader who wants to be a president or anything will accept to go to such neo-colonial talks. I look forward to the day. Have you ever wondered why we have bodies such as the Commonwealth, whose leader is the British monarch? Have you ever wondered? We must take courage one day and with one accord leave such neo-colonial institutions. African Union is sufficient for us. ECOWAS is sufficient for us. Have you ever wondered why the United States of America, which was a British colony, is not a part of the Commonwealth? Because they know better. How can it be that Nigeria, with a population of 250 million, is subservient to a collapsing kingdom with a population of no more than 60 million? We must begin to think. Because if you behave like a slave, you will be treated like a slave. If you behave like a subhuman, you will be treated like a subhuman. And I'm suggesting this in the context of the elections, when the Nigerians were doing their elections like in all other elections, you, like all other Africans, you wait and want to hear, what is it that the European observers did or said? What is it that the American observers said? And when you have heard that, you do not care what the African Union says. You do not care what ECOWAS said. In other words, subconsciously, we still believe that we are inferior. How can we? How can we? How can we in this day and age when God in his divine wisdom created us as equals? I want an electoral process. An electoral process that will give us the confidence so that we are not looking at Al Jazeera to tell us whether we conducted free and fair elections. Where we are not looking at the BBC and Radio Deutsche Welle and CNN and Radio France. It can be done. I look forward to the day when our election systems will be conducted in an atmosphere of confidence and honesty. When the Saudana was speaking and talking about honesty, and the Saudana, if you are alive today, you would ask this audience, but I'll ask on your behalf, Saudana. Why is it that Nigerians still continue to print ballots outside of Nigeria? They are not printing presses in Nigeria. Saudana, I know why. We do not trust ourselves. That is why we still print them outside. Saudana, you would not have stopped there. You would also have asked, why do we have equipment which is from outside? I know why. Because when you left, you thought that we would do better, but we have not. So we still borrow equipment which we use in our elections. And even when we use them, we surrender ourselves. We think that machines are better than us. We do not know that machines are just as good as our honesty, Saudana. I look forward to the day when we in Nigeria and in the continent of Africa will be reminded that servers do not act of their own motion. BVR do not act of their own motion. As long as human beings are dishonest, even if you bring machines that are made in heaven, we will not have free and fair elections. So, Saudana, I have no faith in machines in and of themselves. The only machine that we need to change is us. It is us. We are the machine that is going to make Nigeria great and Africa great. So today I'm saying, this machine that was created in heaven, Saudana, on the day that the machine was crafted by God himself, he looked at the machine and said, it is good. Why is it that this machine now doubts itself and has faith in the things, imperfect things that she has created? Liberate us. Saudana would have asked. Saudana, I hope that your audience will listen to you. I hope that they'll do that which is right. But must we always drive our cars by using the rear view mirror? No, we must not. We have had elections in Nigeria. We have made our mistakes, and we will continue to make mistakes. What have we learned from these elections? From where I sit, and from my experience with African elections, and even with the Nigerian elections, which I've watched over the year keenly, it appears to me that every election cycle, there is some improvement. Even if it is little, there is some improvement. You know, it is Martin Luther King Jr. who said that in the scheme of things, always improve. If you can't be the sun, be the star, he said. If you can't be the highway, be the trail. If you can't run, walk. If you can't walk, crawl. But for God's sake, keep on moving forward. I am suggesting to Nigeria that the mistakes that have been made are mistakes which offer us an opportunity to improve our electoral system. I'm saying that when the tribunals have looked at all the cases, whichever verdict they arrive at, let the verdicts be accepted in grace. Not because tribunals are perfect, no, but history has taught us that when we want to resolve our disputes and we have chosen certain mechanisms for doing so, once they have rendered their verdict, even in their imperfection, for the sake of good order, we accept them, we grumble, we go home and say, hey, wallah. That is what I expect Nigeria to do. Because Nigeria must never and cannot and should not be sacrificed at the altar of temporal politics. You know, you and me are here. But the Nigeria that we are preserving is a Nigeria which is meant to be for our children and children's children. The Nigeria that we are thinking about and about which we run elections is a Nigeria that must exist long after we are gone. And it cannot be right that some of us harbor in their minds that if I do not win what I want, then Nigeria must die. The last time I checked in the Bible, the only person who did so was Samson, who said, I'm going to kill myself and the Philistines. I'm asking the Nigerian politicians, exorcise the ghost of Samson and his Philistines' desire to die. Because going forward, Africa can be great and must be great. Why do I think that Nigeria stands in a critical place? You know, sometimes I tell my war-mongering Africans, and there is no shortage of them, war-mongering. I tell them a stable Nigeria is critical for Africa. A stable Nigeria is critical for West Africa. I ask them, do you know how many people are in Nigeria? The day when you choose to conduct your census, you'll be shocked, but these are my estimates. I suspect that there are 300 million Nigerians. I suspect. You may not agree with me. And I tell my audience, if Nigeria is unstable, can you accommodate the refugees? You cannot. Therefore, it is in your selfish interest that Nigeria remains stable, even if you don't care about Nigeria. I tell them, and I tell the rest of Africa, if Nigeria were to be unstable, can you, the rest of Africa, remain stable? Nigeria is at the very heart of Africa. And I've said it times without number, and I repeat it, and you Nigerians, whenever you hold your elections, you must always remember that you are holding elections that is in the best interest of the continent of Africa. Never imagine that you are only holding elections for Nigeria. Always remember that you are the largest economy in the continent of Africa. Always remember that there is not a country in the continent of Africa which has the kind of human resource that you have. Always remember that there is not a country in the continent of Africa that has the advantages that you have. Always remember that this Nigeria is what is going to make East Africa, West Africa succeed. Remember the days when there was an attempt at destabilization in Africa. And you remember when Nigeria led the ECOMOG, you saw how you stabilized this region. You remember when there was a problem in Gambia and Nigeria stood tall. You remember what happened. You have a leadership position. And those who are leaders must behave like leaders. And I'm urging the politicians here, you may not want to behave like leaders, but remember, you are doing it for Nigeria and the continent of Africa. Whenever the continent of Africa has wanted to chart our own agenda, the continent of Africa has met here in Nigeria. In 1980, when the continent of Africa took the view that we had to conduct our affairs for the best interest of the continent of Africa, it was in Lagos, Nigeria in 1980 under the Lagos Plan of Action. Remember, in 2001, when we said that we wanted to ensure that our health systems are controlled by Africans, it was in Abuja, Nigeria in 2001. Nigeria is the guiding star. Nigeria is a guiding star, and that is why great men such as the Saudana of Sokoto could see it a long time ago. You who are Nigerians, whether politicians in the contemporary sense, whether you are traditional leaders, you owe us a duty. If you fail in that duty, I can imagine what God in heaven will do to punish you. If hell is hot, it will be made hotter for you Nigerians if you fail us. Let us not allow elections to do that to us. As I speak to you now, there is instability in the Cameroons because our governance systems are compromised. As I speak to you now, there is instability in Mali and in Chad and in Burkina Faso and in Tunisia and in Somalia and in Central African Republic because